So today's topic, secrets to a colorful retirement. Retirement can be challenging if not planned carefully. After all, having worked for, in most cases, around 40 years or so, one wants to make the most of this new chapter in life. Today, thanks to Taki Ramtullah, who made the introductions, our speaker will tell us about his journey into retirement. Dr. Mohamed Hirji is a recently retired physician, diagnostic radiologist, and an associate clinical professor of radiology and diagnostic imaging at the University of Alberta Hospital in Edmonton. He previously held the position of divisional chief, Division of Cardiothoracic Imaging at the hospital, and later he served as the radiologist for the Wetaskiwin and the Leduc General Hospitals in Alberta. Dr. Hirji, with that short introduction, I'll pass it on to you to continue, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, I would like him to shower his mercy on all of the participants who are participating here. So his peace and blessings be in all of you. Next, I'd like to thank Mr. Nazmul Damji and Mr. Taki Ramtullah, who were instrumental in facilitating this presentation on this platform. I would like also to thank all of you for having given up your wonderful afternoon or morning to participate on this. My plan is to talk to you for about 40 minutes. It's going to be mostly my experience into how I landed up in this retirement. And most of them are going to be on slides. And as you will notice, almost all my slides have a number at the bottom. That's the slide number. So if you have any questions pertaining to any particular slide, just quote the slide number if you want me to show it too. Now with that, let us begin. A little bit about me. I was born in 1950 in Kampala, Uganda. At the age of 12, my family, for economic reasons, decided to move to Kigoma, which is a small town on the shores of Lake Tanganyika. I finished my grade 8 there, and then I had to leave my family, move to Dar es Salaam, where I stayed for 4 years and finished my O-levels. Following which, my family by then had decided to migrate to Kenya. So my family was still making the plans, so I came to Mombasa, stayed with my uncle, finished my A-levels. After the A-levels, I was selected at the University of Nairobi to enter the Faculty of Medicine. So I spent about 5 years in Nairobi at the University of Nairobi. Following my graduation as an MD, I was posted to Kakamega for my internship. Kakamega is a small town north of Kisumu. After having finished my internship, they posted me to a small town called Msambweni, which is in the south coast of Kenya, just south of Mombasa, about 30 miles or so. Most of you may remember Ukunda. It is part of Ukunda now. Anyway, in Msambweni, after a while, I had some disagreement with the provincial medical officer. And to punish me, they decided to send me to Wajir, which is a very remote place. Essentially, I would say it's the gulag of Kenya. Now, of course, I didn't want to go there, so I decided it was time for me to migrate to Canada. So I came to Canada in 1977, settled initially in Calgary, took up a position as a first-year resident in internal medicine at the Foothills Hospital. Unfortunately, I was the only ethnosheri in Calgary at that time. So after a year and a little bit over that, I decided it was time for me to migrate to Edmonton. So I came to Edmonton following my residency in radiology in Edmonton. I received a scholarship to go to the United States and do cardiothoracic radiology, which I completed, came back, joined the Faculty of Medicine at the University of at the University of Alberta, and became a radiologist there, eventually attaining the position of the chief of the division and the associate professorship of radiology at the University of Alberta. Now, coming back to the topic, what are the problems we face if we do not plan for our retirement? The first and foremost problem people face is financial. However, that is not part of my talk because I have no idea about finances. The other big problem people face is psychosocial issues, which also combines into the health issues that we have. As we get older, most of us start suffering from certain ills. And the other big problem we have is, what do we do with the extra free time we suddenly have on our hands? To tackle those things, let me just go over these. These are the 4 Ds, or the dreaded Ds of retirement. The diseases that we come up with, that we have to cope with. These are statistics from the US. 40% of the people who retire suffer from depression. And people, men in particular, the highest rate of suicide is amongst people aged 65 and over. I guess the women are going to be catching up because of the change in their roles. But until now, about 40% of the men commit suicide. I mean, the suicide rate, is highest in people over 65 or men over 65. And 40% of them suffer from depression. Also, men over 65 has one of the highest rate of divorce. And this is aptly illustrated by George Eastman, who used to be the founder and CEO of the Eastman Kodak Company. At age 77, despite being a billionaire, one day he just woke up, decided life wasn't worth living. He wrote this small message. It says, "To my friends, my work is done. Why wait?" Took up a gun, put it on his temple, and killed himself. So we hopefully do not want to end up in that situation. Now, this is a painting of the University Hospital. I used to work in this place. My office was somewhere in here. Now, my work mainly involved, as a radiologist, looking at images on a 2-dimensional surface and trying to figure out what it meant so that I could convey what I saw to the referring physician, be it physicians or surgeons. Now, sometimes things were very simple. I could convey my message to them in half a page or so of my report. Sometimes things were very complicated, particularly in pediatric cardiac surgery. So being a little lazy and not prepared to have a 4 or 5 page report, I decided I was just going to go draw diagrams for my surgeons. And the surgeons started referring to that as the GPS before the GPS became very common. These are some of the examples, like if a baby was born with some very abnormal vessels, I would just draw these out, give them to the surgeons, and the surgeons would pin up these diagrams on the board in the OR and follow it out as a roadmap when they were operating. This is again a diagram of a disease in the belly. Now, I did that for quite a while. However, in year 2000, I decided I wanted to slow down. So I reduced my workload, which was about 65 hours a week, to about 40 hours a week. But just that extra 20, 25 hours was a little too much for me. I was a workaholic and I had no other interest except for work. So I sort of started looking like this guy with these rotten teeth. And I would sit down on the table and start wondering, what the hell am I going to do next? And this was just the partial retirement. So I said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll watch some movies. But there are only so many movies that you can watch alone in an empty room or an empty theater. Some people are lucky to go back and work part-time. I could have gone back to work, but I was just actually trying to reduce my workload. Some people who retire may want to return to school to learn another trade or just enhance their intellectual being. Some may wish to socialize more. We as a community are lucky because we have majalises and get-togethers, particularly in Toronto. So some people who are more social can join those. One can volunteer, maybe work for Habitat for Humanity or something. But I had no such skills to do that. The two commonest things people do, they either take up a sport like golfing or tennis or something, or develop the hobby. So I said, well, you know what? If everybody does it, why not me? I'm going to take up golf. And so I became a golfer. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that the balls that I tended to hit did not go in the right spots. So I had started having very few friends, either because I broke their windshields or broke their skulls. So I had to come back and say, well, I had to try something else. I bought myself a sailboat and started sailing. And that's, by the way, my brother. So I started sailing. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I'm not very good at sports. I'm quite klutzy. And I hurt myself. So I had now a big problem. What am I going to do? Even though I was just partly retired, that extra free time was killing me. I did not know what to do. So one day, as I was sitting depressed, my wife decided to buy me some painting supplies. She said, well, you know what? Painting is a safe hobby for you. The worst you can do is poke the tip of the brush in your eye. And Alberta Healthcare would cover it anyway, so we won't have to spend too much money. And so that's how I got into painting. Now, this is the gist of the topic, the colorful retirement that I weaved into. It was not my initial choice, but somehow that's how I came into it. Now I'm going to explain to you why I paint, which I've almost done mostly. What do I paint? Which medium do I use? And what do I do with the paintings that I collect? This is one of my first paintings. After my wife brought me all that stuff, I just sat down, went ahead, and this was on the 10th of June, 2001. That was the first day I painted in my life. And this was my painting. Now, what do I paint? I paint still lifes, portraits, seascapes and waterscapes, snowscapes. I paint animals, I paint birds, I paint cars, buildings, flowers, mountains, night scenes, people. And recently I got into plein air. I'll explain to you a little later on what that means. Now, as you can see, I practically paint everything. Just because I love to paint, anything that comes up that I hadn't painted before is a challenge to me. And I try to accept the challenge. The best part is it keeps me busy and intellectually intrigued. Now, these are some of the portraits. Now, the portraits, this is probably the one you have mostly seen. It's the girl with the pearl earrings by Vermeer. I sometimes even paint teddy bears and things that my kids, when they were young, had these toys, so I used to paint those. Some of the waterscapes that I paint, be it oceans that I grew up next to in Mombasa and Dar es Salaam, or some waterfalls that are abundant in the Rockies in Alberta. I also paint quite a few snowscapes. Now, most of you from Vancouver and Toronto may not know what this white stuff is. It's quite prevalent in Alberta. In fact, we live with it for about 11 months out of the year, and it's called snow. I paint animals, birds, fish, whatever. I even painted cars. And this is quite interesting. A gentleman lives in the same block that I do, is a collector of vintage cars. So one day I saw this red car parked in his driveway. I really loved the car. So I started sketching it, and he came by and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I hope you don't mind, I'm just sketching your car." And he says, "Oh, no. And then he started asking me what I do. And I said, "Well, I'm actually retired. And I just wanted to sketch this, so I'll go home and paint it." He says, "Oh, geez, you know what? Can you paint this car for me? I'll purchase it from you." Now, I just did not want to paint it with this ugly fence and some trees at the back. So I just started talking to him and realized that he loved going to the mountains quite often. So I transposed this car with a background of some mountains at the back. Guess what? The next thing, as soon as I give him this painting, he says, "Oh, let me show you another car that I have." So he showed me this car and asked me to paint that. So having painted that as well with, again, a mountain background, he showed me his third car, which is the Ford. I believe it's a 1908 Ford. And again, I painted that. And now he has all three of them lined up in his wall, covering the entire wall of his bedroom. Oops, I'm sorry, I should have been there. I also paint buildings. Most of you are obviously familiar with this building on the right, which is the CN Tower in Toronto. This is a painting in Peggy's Cove. This is from California in Carmel. And this is the most painted and photographed lighthouse in the States in Maine. I paint quite a few flowers, and they're probably the most admired by women, particularly, because they love these flowers. Being close to the Rockies, another thing I tend to paint quite a bit are mountains. This is the Three Sisters. Most of you may know. On your way to Banff, you pass Kenmore and the Three Sisters Mountains. This is the Valley of 10 Peaks, or Moraine Lake. It used to be on a $20 bill. And this is the scene from the Athabasca Glacier. I even paint nocturnes or night scenes. This is a painting from Italy. This is just a conjured up painting of a night scene, probably around the holiday season. And this is the night scene of Edmonton. Now you might suddenly wonder, so what? Is that Edmonton? I say yes, but of course, with some artistic license, I have made the buildings a little bit taller than they are. They're usually about no more than 10 or 20 stories. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, there are tall buildings in Edmonton, but I've made them taller. I even paint people, particularly people doing certain actions. As you see this grandpa fishing, a couple probably arguing while the dog is waiting underneath, waiting for them to finish so they can go for their walk. And a little girl, this was in Nova Scotia, just playing around in the sand. Plein air, that is my recent hobby. What is plein air painting? Plein air painting is a French word meaning painting on location. I pick up my painting gear. I go stand in front of a beautiful place that I need to paint, and I paint. Now, this is Edmonton, the downtown. There is a river in between where I'm standing and the downtown Edmonton. This is the bridge across the river, and this is my painting. So this is while I'm painting it. This is the painting on the right at the bottom. And as I was painting this, by the way, a lady comes by and says, "Do you sell your painting?" And I say, "Yes, I do." And she says, "I'd like to purchase this." And I said, "You know what? It's not yet complete. I have to first let it dry for a few weeks. Then I have to varnish it. In fact, before I varnish, something called oiling out. I have to oil it out. I have to varnish it with 2 coats of varnish before you can have it." She was prepared to wait, and she got the painting. Now, let me tell you what painting has done for me. If you don't like being an addict, do not take up painting, because it is an addictive hobby. I have currently an illness that I cannot get out because I have very bad lung condition. if I ever caught an infection, essentially I would be gone. So even before the COVID, socializing for me is a big problem. And the pandemic has not been too different for me. So due to my ill health, I'm mostly confined to my house, or I can go plein air painting where there are not too many people. But I still enjoy the outdoors whenever I go painting. And therefore, I'm never lonely. I'm always busy painting or doing something. So if any of you feel lonely, this may not be a bad thing to catch up. Now, you might say, what does this talk have to do with me? The purpose of this talk is to inspire at least some of you who wish to take up the hobby, especially if, as I mentioned, at this age, we come up with some ill health. We are depressed, we are anxious, we are lonely. And especially now with the pandemic, it may not be a bad thing to do. Also, we are very much blessed by this incredible beauty of the Canadian landscape. So we should be thankful to God that we live in this country where A, we have such beautiful landscape, and B, where all these products are available, so we can easily get into this hobby. Now, one of the commonest things I hear is people say, oh, just a minute. And those excuses are, I cannot even draw a straight line. In fact, in no painting will you ever find a straight line. The best sentence that was said was in this movie. I don't know how many of you are know about this movie called Ratatouille. In it, a small kid and some rats try to open up a restaurant. And a very rough critic is of the opinion that nobody except a really well-trained chef can cook. And this small clip is about that. I'm just going to play it twice because your sound, it's a very soft sound, so I'll just play it twice.
In the past, I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Gusteau's famous motto, anyone can cook. But I realize only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
I'll play it once more so that you can get the gist.
I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Gusteau's famous motto, anyone can cook. But I realize only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
So as I mentioned, we may not all be Wayne Gretzky's, but we can play hockey. So essentially, not all of us will become Picassos, but we will be able to draw something or paint something. Now, there are several questions I get answered whenever I talk about this to people about taking a painting. I'll try to answer some of them. People ask me, how long does it take to do a painting? I said, well, a simple painting like this you see on the screen, a small painting with a tulip, the planning, the drawing, the painting, etc., no more than 30 minutes. However, if you pick up a complex painting where you have to have a building, a sailboat, some water, some background, Then you have to draw all of these. And I used to do this. Like I would collect several of these pictures and make up a drawing. And from the drawing, I would make up a painting. This takes quite a while, about 40 hours or so. As you can see, this boat has been bordered from here. The colors have been changed. I have the background. The clouds were probably picked up from another painting. The trees, from another picture, the trees from another picture. Maybe there is a small shack that I have found from somewhere. And then the house. And of course, the porch does not look like the house in the city. So that may take a while because first of all, you have to collect the right photographs, combine them into one painting. Now, another question that often comes up, why not just take a photograph? Why do you have to go through all this hassle of painting? Well, this is a small pond in Edmonton. It's sort of used as a catchment area for rain. And you can see how ugly it looks. So I went plein air painting and changed it a little. I removed the road and the cars and made it into just a nice meadow, far away trees, and then all these colorful trees in the foreground and the middle ground. This is another scene. A young lady who I used to work with sent this to me saying, Dr. Hirji, this looks like a beautiful painting you might want to do. I looked at it, it looks beautiful, but it's not that beautiful. You could definitely improve on it. And this is what I did on the right side. I chopped part of it, which was useless, and the rest I just beautified into what I think is a very beautiful painting. Another question. Excuse my coughing because of my lung condition. Which medium do I use? Now, all the media use the same pigment. It's just the carrier that's different. So you can just do drawing either with a pencil, which contains graphite, or colored pencils, which are not the ones that our kids use, but specialist color pencils, which contain the same pigment as most art materials. You can do pastels, which are usually in a form of a chalk that you can draw with. You can use watercolors, acrylics, oils, or a combination. I do all of these. Now, pencil drawings, very affordable. They're very versatile because you can take your pen and paper anywhere. It allows for easy correction if you have an eraser. And pencil drawings are the foundation of all other painting media. Another system is the colored pencil. These are specially pigmented pencils, a little on the expensive side, but still very affordable. Again, quite versatile because they are pencils, but you need several different colors, so you may have lots of them. Because of the pigments, which are pretty high end, they're very difficult to correct because you can't easily remove them from paper. And you will require some knowledge of color theory, meaning which color comes next to what color to provide the best presentation. Pastels. Now, pastels are pigments in form of either a chalk or in a pen form. The only problem is Pastels do not mix or mingle with each other. So you need different colors for different items, whereas in other media, you can mix colors to produce a third color. For example, in watercolors, if you use yellow pigment, mix it with blue pigment, you'll get your green. In pastels, you'll have to have a separate green pigment. You also need a special paper. So that's a little expensive. Pastels are also very delicate because the pastel powder is stuck onto the paper. So if you touch it, it'll come out. So you need to store it much more carefully, very delicate, and they have to be framed under glass in case you want to hang it, because otherwise the chalk pastel will come off. Watercolor, most people tend to gravitate initially to watercolor, and that's what I did, which is a stupidity, because it's a master's medium. It's very, very complex. However, the advantages of watercolor is easy to start up with, easy to clean, easy to store. It's not too expensive. It's very difficult to master, as I say. That's why it's called master's medium. So it's better not to start with watercolors. And you cannot correct your mistakes. So if you make a mistake, you just have to restart completely right from the scratch. Also, watercolors dries lighter. So if you paint a certain shade, it'll get lighter as it dries. So you never know what you're going to get until it has dried. And the final problem is it has to be framed under glass. So you must have seen watercolors in some people's homes or your own homes, and the glass always reflects some reflection. So you're always trying to dodge that reflection to look at the painting. Acrylic. This is now becoming extremely common. And most people start with this, and I think it's a great thing to do. It's not too expensive. It allows corrections as many times as you need. It needs either a canvas or a panel to paint upon. The problem with acrylic is, unlike watercolor, it's the opposite. It dries darker. And the other big problem is it dries too quickly. So you have to work pretty fast. Otherwise, before you add the next layer, the previous layer has dried. So you cannot mix the paints. The cleanup of acrylic is very, very easy. It just cleans up with water. Extremely popular for people who are starting up. And the beauty is it can be framed without, you can hang it without glass. So it doesn't need any glass or anything to frame it with. Oils. This is a fantastic medium to paint with. Again, unfortunately, it needs some canvas or special panels to paint upon. It's a bit on the expensive side. The beauty is you get what you put on the canvas, the exact shade. It doesn't dry lighter or darker. And if you're going to paint outdoors, plein air, it's a perfect medium. The cleaning up is a little difficult, but you learn it with time. It doesn't take that much. You need to take care of the fumes, and it may be a little messy. And again, you can hang it up without glass. Now, you may wonder, what happens to all my paintings? Luckily, Edmonton is an artist's city. Every year in July, there is something called an art walk, where people just gather on the streets, you show your art, they come and purchase them like the bees, gathering around honey. Another place is I used to, before the COVID started, annual art shows at my home. People would come, look at the paintings, purchase them. I also have a website, and I sell my paintings from the website. Now, when I sell my paintings, at first I used to give out my paintings for free to people, but I realized they were never valued. They were just thrown away. And the reason was because the guys probably did not like art in the first place, and they got the painting and say, I'll throw it away. What the heck? It doesn't matter. So now what I do is I tell the people, if you purchase my art, you don't give me the money, but you instead donate it to a charity, an Islamic charity. So they donate the money to the charity and they get the art, quote unquote, for free. However, because they spent the money on charity, they get a tax deduction. So they get the painting for half the price. The charity wins, the buyer wins, and I get the satisfaction that somebody has hung a painting of mine in their home and some of the money has gone towards a good cause. So in summary, we have discussed the hazards of not planning your retirement. I've presented a hobby that is very enjoyable and it will last you a lifetime. It doesn't require too much effort and too much money. And it's a very versatile hobby. I've shown you a little glimpse of my art. I've answered some of the common questions that I face. And I hope I've inspired some of you to take this hobby up. And with that, I would say happy Halloween to all of you. And I will now field some questions from the audience. Thank you.
That's amazing. Very interesting, Dr. Hirji. I certainly learned a few things. Now, do we have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat. Or maybe there is. Yes, there is something there in the chat. How long does it normally take you to paint a picture? I think you answered that, but maybe you could just summarize that again.
Okay, depending on how big the painting is, which medium I'm using, it may take anywhere, as I mentioned, from maybe a few minutes, a very quick painting. I would say maybe half an hour at the minimum, or it may take several days if I have to plan the whole thing, because I have to first draw it. And if it's a complex painting, I collect certain things together and make up a collage and then start painting it. Luckily, I now have a program like Photoshop that I connect everything together, make up a plan before I start. So that may take several days, if anything. I hope I've answered that question.
Right, great. Is there something like copyright on paintings?
There definitely is. I, for example, cannot paint a painting of somebody, or somebody cannot paint my painting, because it's just like a literary artwork. You can sue them if they do. Now, you saw one of the paintings of mine that I have copied from the girl with the pearl earring that I showed you. But if I mention, first of all, I cannot sell that painting. And if I mention that it was drawn after Vermeer, or it's a copy of Vermeer, I'm giving him the credit, that's fine. But I cannot profit from it.
Right. So you can do a Mona Lisa, for example, the famous painting, right?
That is correct. But I cannot profit from it by selling it. And I have to give the credit to the person who paints it initially.
So you're saying that you can paint it, give credit to whoever the painter was, but you can't sell it, you can't profit from it?
That is correct, because it's somebody's intellectual property. I am not allowed to use that and profit from it.
Right.
And a little likeness, I might say, well, you know what? I'm going to change the background, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to change a little here. They
Yeah.
may take you to court. And if the judge decides that it's still based on that painting, you have a problem.
Hmm.
Most of the times they would sort of send you a letter saying, we would like you to destroy this painting. Do not sell it, or whatever. And if you then do not accept their conditions, they might take you to court.
Right, right, right. Interesting question. Have there been any paintings that defeated you, that you gave up?
No, luckily I did not. The more difficult the painting, the more challenging it is. I'm sure the golfers amongst the audience know this very well. The more they have to struggle, the more they feel like they must win. So if you have that intent in you that you want to just go and defeat the painting rather than the painting defeating you, you will manage. It may take a while. It may take several trials. At the start, when I started watercolors, I would destroy about 6 of my paintings to get one good one. Now, fewer than that. Just an answer to the previous question, how long does it take you to paint? When I do plein air painting, that is outdoors, I go outdoors, pick up my material, from start to finish, I keep myself to give myself no more than 2 hours to paint. Because in 2 hours, the shadows have changed, the position of the sun has changed, the lighting has changed, everything has changed. So you have to be disciplined enough to finish it in 2 hours.
But if you didn't finish in 2 hours, you could always take a picture and take it home and finish it there.
Yes, you do, but you lose that.
It's not the same.
Exactly.
Right, right, right. Interesting question is, how about colorblind people? They can't take a painting.
Good point. It's a very fantastic question, actually. Most of us will be surprised. If, for example, I painted a tree of a different color, and if you go to my website, you'll be able to see them. If I painted a tree purple, your mind will still say it's a tree. We think we are used to looking at colors. That is not true. We are more used to looking at what we call the grayscale, the dark and the light. So if, and in painter's term, it's called value. If your values are correct, meaning the dark and the light is correct, it will read correct. You don't have to have the exact color to make it look correct.
Good, good, good. Do you ever paint from imagination, or do you always have to have a sketch or something in front of you?
Well, you know what? I have something to start with, but then I'll add on to that. Like, for example, I'll say, okay, let me paint a boat today. Now, I'll say, fine, I'm going to paint a boat. I'm going to have some rocks on the side. I'm going to have a beach. But then I want to have a boat sort of, depending on how, if it's a simple canoe, you can draw that. But if it's a very intricate, those ships the Viking used to use, then you have to make sure that the mast is in the correct place. Otherwise, it may not look correct. So then I would bring out some pictures and look at them. For example, if I wanted to paint a lionfish. I mean, any fish is easier to paint, but if I wanted to paint a lionfish, I have to see what sort of scales do they have? What sort of eyes do they have? Do they have oval eyes or circular eyes? So yes, I would then delve into some pictures to clarify my drawings.
Right, right. Yeah. So this is also related to that. You have to have a sketch or something in front of you to paint, or to get it exactly right the way you want it to.
Yeah, you know what? Once you have the plan in your mind and you have decided this is what I want to do, it gets much easier. Like once the plan is made up and you've made up a rough drawing, then you can carry forth. Now, there are certain, I made this very simplistic, but there are certain laws that you follow. And if you go to my website, there is a space called the blogs. On the blogs, I sort of teach art in a way. Like there is something called the rule of thirds. There are certain rules to follow. That if you're going to paint something, make sure you don't put it right in the center, because the center is where it's the ugliest. The space on one side has to be different from the space from the other side. If you are painting a person, for example, the person's eyes has to be following a certain area. So these are some of the rules you learn after you start painting, just to make it more presentable.
There's something similar in photography? Same kind of rules?
Exactly true. Exactly the same things. People who are good photographers usually learn some of these basics of, like most of cameras have that grid that you see.
Yes.
The spots where the grids intersect are the places where you want to put your most important thing. They're called the sweet spots. The painting is exactly the same. You want to put your, for example, if you're painting a person, the eye is the most important in a person. You want to put the eye in one of those 4 spots. If you're painting, for example, a scene in an ocean, and your focal spot, there's something called the focal spot, which is where you want people to look. You put that focal spot in one of those intersecting areas. Plus, you arrange the other things in such a way that your eyes are pointed towards the area of interest.
Interesting. Couple of final questions. When having painted so much outdoors and in the nature, at times you must wonder. I mean, you started this presentation with thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc. But you must wonder at the beauty the Almighty has created for us to admire.
I tell you, you know what? Before I started painting, and I can ask that question to most people who have never painted. If I ask them a question, what is the color of clouds? 99% of the people will say white. It's my challenge today to all of you who are listening. Take a piece of paper or a napkin next time you look at a cloud and compare the two. No cloud will be white. That's the first thing I noticed as I started painting. I started admiring. I said, I can't believe how God has created even small things have so much beauty in them. And there is a pattern. If you pick up a pine cone, you will notice a certain pattern in the way the cones are laid. The trees, no 2 trees will look similar. They'll look different, just like 2 humans look different. No 2 trees will look similar. And when you paint, you can't paint them similar. It's called cloning. They look ugly. You have to have a tree slightly different than the other tree. Otherwise, you lose interest. So to keep the people interested in your paintings, you make sure there is a variety.
Excellent, excellent point. Two final questions. One is any books you can recommend for someone wanting to get into painting, or
Yes.
someone? Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. The first thing is, do you want to learn how to draw or do you learn how to paint? Number two, depending on, do you want to start with oils, watercolors, acrylics, etc. So depending on what you want to do, if you're going to be drawing, the best book I can suggest is a lady called Betty White. Betty, geez, I forget. And if you send me an email, I can suggest some to you. Betty Edwards, that's her name. Betty Edwards. She has two great books on how to draw. It's called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. Now, again, if you want to draw with, paint with acrylics, different people, different authors, oils, different authors, watercolors, different authors, pastels, different authors.
Right. But if someone wants to go sort of even one step before that, as to should I go into watercolor or oils or acrylic, or is this, there must be something there, or does one go to YouTube and just, or YouTube or internet?
The trouble with YouTube and internet is you either get very good stuff or terrible stuff.
Right.
The best thing is to talk to somebody who is an artist, who can explain to you the pros and cons of each medium, saying, you know what, how much time do you want to spend? How much money do you want to spend? For example, I'll just give you this very small example. Watercolors. You can buy a brush that is junk for $5. And the same size brush will cost you $500. And I joke not, $500. This brush is made from the tail of the Kalinsky sable, which is only available in Siberia. So they catch these squirrel-like animals and they use their hairs. Each hair is more precious than a strand of gold. The manufacturers take these strands of hairs they are all handmade together into a brush. And the brush, depending on the size, will cost you about $500 for a brush. The same thing with the pigments. You can either have artist-grade pigments or Walmart pigments that you can get them very, very cheaply. The tube of a pigment may cost you $50 versus $5 from Walmart. Depending on the material you use, your paintings may suffer. You may not enjoy it as much, and they will not last as much. They'll start cracking on you. So I would say try not to skimp on quality. Then you'll enjoy. For example, the papers. I call it papers, but it's actually not a paper. It's a fabric. Watercolor is drawn on a fabric. What they do is they take cotton fibers, they press them into a sheet, which they call paper, a watercolor paper, but it's actually a fabric, watercolor fabric made of 100% cotton. If it's not 100% cotton, it'll yellow over time, just like our newspapers do. So it has to be 100% cotton. Therefore, it will last hundreds of years. And the pigment, if you have beautiful pigments, the watercolor will actually be luminous and shine, versus junk pigments will destroy it. So it depends also what you use.
To start off with, maybe just a trip to Walmart and see if you really see if you really like it. If something that
what I can guarantee you, if you were to today walk into Walmart, buy a couple of things and start. you will give up painting. Because A, they'll be very frustrating to paint with. B, they will look ugly. And you say, why am I doing this? Whereas, you know, to start off, let me put it this way. If you wanted to start with watercolors, then I tell you, unfortunately, watercolors are very difficult. But if you wanted to start with, remember the first painting I showed you about a glass with some flowers? That's the first painting I did because my wife brought me some watercolor stuff. She spent $65, which you may say, wow, that's quite a bit, but it's not that much if you think about it. And you can get 5 or 6 paintings out of that $65. So it's not that bad. I mean, they were not the best quality materials. The paper was very good, but the brushes were not. But then as I graduated, started enjoying it, I started buying better brushes.
Right. Great. Final question. Do you paint the cards, Christmas cards, Eid cards, birthday greeting cards, anything like that?
What I do is, most of the time, my paintings get made into cards. So my paintings get made into cards, but sometimes I do paint just small cards. I'm not sure, I might even have some, but most of the time I just would paint small cards. The problem with a small painting does not take any much less time. It takes as much time as a large painting. So I might as well do a large painting and make a card out of it. And this is the interesting part. In a small painting, if I make a mistake of, let's say, making an extra line, which is 1 centimeter long, in a 5 centimeter painting, that's 1/5 the size of the painting. In a 50 centimeter long painting, that 1 centimeter mark is not even visible. You won't even see that mistake. So it's always better to paint big because you can always shrink it. It's very difficult the other way around.
Right. Great. I think it's been an excellent presentation.
Enjoyed. Yeah. Can I congratulate Dr. Hirji for a very fascinating presentation with a very good background and knowledge. Just wanted to mention that I do watercoloring since 10 or 12 years. My name is Amir. I'm in Toronto. And I really liked your presentation.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm glad you're doing something, and I hope you enjoy it too, as I do.
I do really very much. The more I go deeper, the better I become. I start to get addicted and find, very enjoyable. I had this one question initially. Since you are painting with different mediums, isn't oil painting harmful to the lungs?
It's a very good point. Do oil paintings harm the lungs? Now, oil paints, the pigment is the same. In watercolors, they use gum arabic to mix the pigment and put it in a tube. In oil paintings, they use linseed oil. Now, unless you're allergic to linseed oil, there is no problem. The problem comes in the cleaning solutions. Now they've come up with water miscible paints, oil paints, so you can actually clean your brushes and everything with water. Or there are chemicals now that are not as volatile as they used to be. So one is called Gamsol, which is it's not very toxic. And what I do is I just keep it closed almost all the time. Unless I have to clean my brush, I open it, quickly clean my brush, close it again. So I don't keep the lid open. And especially if you go out and paint in the open, it's not a problem because you're not inhaling that constantly. But yes, I'm sure there are some problems. Now, my problem with my lung, I don't think has anything to do with the paintings that I do. It's just another disease that I caught.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation. Your presentation was exceptional. Indeed, I enjoyed it every minute. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, with that, Amir Bhai, by the way, thank you for your comments. I'm glad you're enjoying these sessions and you're managing to join us. Thank you.
I just wanted to show you my painting also.
Very beautiful.
And this one is the Christmas tree at the, you can see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just a small sample. It does take time indeed to do paintings. I do have other paintings, but it is, for me, I find it a very good antidote to loneliness, against depression, etc. Yeah.
Which is what Mohamed Bhai talked about earlier. Thank you.
Yes, I want to get connected.
Sorry, carry on.
I wanted to get connected or talk with, was it hirjiart.com that I can?
Yes, hirjiart.com. You'll find my email there and you can contact me or whatever. So
yeah, I would definitely like to contact.
And as I said, you don't have to be an artist. Like, I don't know whether you can see these, but I usually sit down, put up a toy, teddy bear or something in front of me and I start painting. I mean, drawing. Can you see that?
Yes, yes, it is very.
So, I mean, this my whole book is just filled with similar things, you know, like.
Oh yes.
I just sit down and grab anything that I see in front of me. If I have nothing to do, I just, like everybody knows Dilbert and Dogbert.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you've done plenty of works in those short amount of years that you know, I cannot try different mediums as much as you have. I just like to confine or limit myself to just the watercolor, just to not get confused with different medias. But you are exceptional to be able to handle so many different medias and know the intricacies, the science out of medias, brush, and what you said about the $500 brush, I vouch and agree with you 100%. I've heard that from other teachers also, and I've seen those very expensive Siberia, that brush from that special tail of that creature. So it is. I acknowledge, what is the right word? Vouch that what you spoke was 100% true. Yeah.
Excellent. We are over time.
Thank you.
Dr. Hirji, thank you so much for enlightening us on the ins and outs of painting as a hobby. And I'm sure I certainly learned something from your presentation. I'm sure others enjoyed it as well. And well, happy painting to you, and hopefully to at least some of us, if we decide to sort of go that route.
And
thank
if
you.
anybody needs to ask any question, just email it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So just a reminder, next week we'll go to Pakistan. We'll talk about pluralism and what Afghanistan activities have done to the Pakistani society and culture and the pluralism there. You'll get the notice in the mail early next week, or at least hopefully tonight or tomorrow. Thank you all. Be safe and take care.
Thank you.
Okay.